While most of my friends' families revolved around their parents, in our house, my grandmother was the one who really called the shots. And honestly, she had every right to. She'd built our family's exclusive tableware store from nothing, turning it into a thriving business that made her quite wealthy. "Your grandmother has always had an eye for beautiful things," my father would say whenever customers praised our store's collection. He and my mother ran the day-to-day operations now, but everyone knew who the real owner was. My grandmother had only stepped back to enjoy her retirement, not to give up control. My younger brother Tommy was being groomed as the heir apparent from the moment he could walk. "He needs to learn everything about the business," my mother would say, while practically ignoring my existence. It didn't seem to matter that I was getting straight A's, while Tommy could barely be bothered to crack open a book. "Who needs to be smart to run a store?" Tommy would say, sprawled on the couch playing video games instead of doing his homework. "I just need to know how to count money." Our parents would laugh at these comments like they were adorable, while I sat at the dining table working on my advanced math problems. But I had my secret weapon, Grandma. Every weekend, I'd go to her house, and we'd play what she called business games. She taught me everything about running a successful store, from inventory management to customer service, from profit margins to negotiating with suppliers. "Now, Rachel," she'd say, setting up our pretend store on her living room table, "if a customer wants to buy this crystal wine set for $500, but our cost was $200, what's our profit margin?" Her eyes would twinkle as I quickly calculated the numbers. "That's a 60% margin, Grandma," I'd answer excitedly. "But we should consider our overhead costs too, right?" She'd beam at me, pulling another gift from her seemingly endless supply. "That's my girl. You understand business better than most adults I know." These sessions with Grandma weren't just fun, they sparked something in me. While my parents were busy preparing Tommy to inherit the store, I was making my own plans. I decided I would go to college and study business properly. When I turned 14, my life changed dramatically. I still remember that evening as if it was yesterday. My parents called me into the living room after dinner, and my father's stern face told me this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Rachel," he said, looking at me with cold eyes, "your mother and I have been talking. It's time for you to stop being lazy and help out with the family business. Starting tomorrow, you'll work at the store after school." The next day, I started my new job at our family store. Every day after school, while my brother Tommy went home to play video games and mess around, I was mopping floors, dusting shelves, arranging expensive china, and doing whatever else needed to be done. I worked hard, determined to prove myself. Sometimes I'd stay late into the evening, making sure every crystal glass sparkled and every display was perfect. After 3 months of working alongside the adult employees, I started noticing something that bothered me more and more. Every Friday, all the employees would receive their paychecks. They'd discuss weekend plans and what they were going to do with their earnings. Meanwhile, I worked just as hard, sometimes harder, but received nothing. One evening, when the store was empty except for my parents counting the day's earnings at the register, I gathered my courage and approached them. "Mom, Dad," I started nervously, "I've been thinking. I'm doing the same work as the other employees, actually, I'm doing multiple jobs. Shouldn't I be getting paid too?" The look they exchanged made my blood run cold. My father's face hardened, and my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Paid?" my father scoffed. "Do you have any idea how much we spend on you? Food, clothes, that roof over your head, you think all that's free?" "But that's different," I argued. "Parents are supposed to." "Don't you dare tell us what parents are supposed to do," my mother snapped. "Consider your work here as payment for everything we provide for you." Many children would be grateful for such an arrangement. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but fought to hold them back. That's when my mother stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper that I'll never forget. "And let me make something very clear," she hissed. "Don't even think about running to your grandmother with this. This is our business to run as we see fit. If I find out you've complained to her, you'll regret it. Understood?" For 2 long years, I worked without pay, watching other employees receive their weekly paychecks while I got nothing but tired feet and calloused hands. But as my 16th birthday approached, I made a decision that would change everything. The day after my birthday, I walked into my parents' office with my head held high. "I quit," I announced firmly. My father's head snapped up from his paperwork. "What did you just say?" "I'm not working here anymore," I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "I need my own money, and since you won't pay me, I found a job at the Coffee Corner Cafe. They're hiring part-time after school." My parents exchanged alarmed looks. My mother recovered first, her eyes narrowing calculatingly. "Fine," she said slowly, "but on one condition, you tell your grandmother you're still working here. She doesn't need to know about this arrangement." As I walked out of that office, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time since I turned 14, I was taking control of my own life, and it felt amazing. My first day at Coffee Corner marked the beginning of my new life. The manager, Sarah, was nothing like my parents. She was kind, patient, and actually appreciated hard work. Every Friday, I'd get my paycheck, and that feeling was indescribable. For the first time in my life, I had money that was truly mine. I loved everything about my new job: the smell of fresh coffee, the regular customers who learned my name, and especially my coworkers who treated me like an equal, not a servant. The best part? I could finally buy things for myself without having to beg my parents. My first paycheck went toward a new phone, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The second one bought me some new clothes. But what I enjoyed most was being able to buy small gifts for Grandma. One week it would be her favorite chocolates, another week a beautiful scarf I spotted at the mall. "Oh, sweetheart, you shouldn't spend your store wages on me," she'd say, her eyes twinkling as she admired whatever small present I'd brought. Those moments were the hardest, lying to Grandma about still working at the store. She'd ask how things were going there, and I'd make up stories about rearranging displays or helping customers. "You have such a good eye for presentation," she'd beam proudly. "Just like I did at your age." The guilt would eat at me, but I kept reminding myself that this lie was protecting my newfound freedom. As senior year progressed, my grades stayed perfect. My teachers started talking about top universities: Harvard, Yale, Stanford. "With your academic record, Rachel, you could go anywhere," my guidance counselor said during one of our meetings. But I knew better. My parents wouldn't spend a dime on my education, they'd made that clear enough over the years. And while Grandma would probably help if I asked, I couldn't bring myself to do it. After years of being dependent on family, I wanted to stand on my own feet. So I focused my research on local options, and discovered that our city college had an excellent business program. Better yet, they offered full scholarships to top students. I spent weeks perfecting my application, and when the acceptance letter came with the scholarship offer, I felt like I'd won the lottery. The morning before graduation, Grandma visited me with a special gift, a stunning new laptop. "For my future businesswoman," she'd said with a warm smile, hugging me tight. "I know you'll do great things with it." That evening at the graduation dinner, with just my parents and brother present, I decided it was time to share my news. "I've enrolled in City College's business program," I announced, trying to keep my voice casual. "Full scholarship." The silence following my announcement was broken by my father's calculating smile. "Well, that's certainly convenient," he said, exchanging a look with my mother. "At least we won't have to worry about tuition." "Yes, you've solved that problem quite nicely," my mother added, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Which brings us to our next point. Now that you're an adult and finished with high school, we need to discuss your living arrangements." "What do you mean?" I asked, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "Rent," my father said flatly. "Starting today, you'll need to pay rent to continue living here." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of bizarre joke. But their faces remained serious, and my laughter died in my throat. "You can't be serious," I said, looking between them. "I'm your daughter." "You're an adult now," my mother countered. We're no longer legally obligated to support you. This house belongs to us, and if you want to continue living here, you'll need to pay your fair share." My mind was spinning. "What about Tommy?" I asked, glancing at my brother who was unusually quiet. "Will he have to pay rent when he turns 18 too?" The way my parents avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. Of course Tommy wouldn't have to pay rent. Perfect, precious Tommy would never be treated this way. "That's different," my father muttered, not even bothering to explain how. "This is insane," I said, pushing back from the table. "I'm your child. I have a right to live in my own home." "This isn't your home," my mother snapped, her mask of civility finally cracking. "This is our house, and if you won't pay rent, you need to leave. Tonight." "Tonight?" I echoed in disbelief. "You're throwing me out on graduation night?" "You have an hour to pack your things," my father said, returning to his dinner as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life. I ran upstairs in a daze, tears blurring my vision as I threw clothes and necessities into my bags. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip them closed. College wouldn't start for months. What was I supposed to do until then? My first thought was Grandma. She would help me, I knew she would. But when I called her number, it went straight to voicemail. Then I remembered, she'd left for her annual trip to Hawaii just yesterday. She'd be gone for at least 3 weeks. I couldn't ruin her vacation with this drama. She deserved to enjoy her time off without having to deal with my parents' cruelty. Wiping my tears, I scrolled through my phone contacts until I found Jenny's number. We'd been friends since middle school, and her family had always been kind to me. 20 minutes later, I was loading my bags into Jenny's car, leaving behind the only home I'd ever known. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of my parents watching from the window, their faces expressionless. In that moment, I finally accepted what I'd always known deep down: they had never really loved me at all. Life fell into a new routine during those 3 weeks at Jenny's house. Wake up on her fold-out couch before dawn, quietly get ready so I wouldn't disturb her family, work my shifts at the cafe, save every penny I could. Sarah, my manager, was a godsend during this time. She understood my situation and increased my hours without me even having to ask. Working helped keep my mind off things. I threw myself into every task, whether it was crafting perfect lattes or scrubbing down the equipment at closing time. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Jenny would say when I'd come home exhausted after another double shift. But what else could I do? I needed to save as much as possible before college started, and staying busy meant less time to think about my parents' betrayal. I avoided them completely during this time. They never called or texted, and I was fine with that. What could they possibly say to justify throwing their daughter out on graduation night? Tommy sent me one message asking where I was, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. When Grandma finally returned from Hawaii after those long 3 weeks, I felt a surge of hope so strong it almost made me dizzy. I'd waited patiently, forcing myself not to contact her during her vacation. She deserved to enjoy her time away without getting dragged into family drama. But now, finally, I could tell her everything. With trembling fingers, I typed out a message: "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet?" Her response came faster than I expected, but instead of her usual warm reply with a time and place, it was just a link. My heart started pounding as I clicked it, opening my mother's social media page. What I saw made my blood run cold. "My heart is breaking as I write this," my mother's post began, the words dripping with false sincerity. "Our beloved daughter Rachel has run away from home. But what makes this situation even more painful is discovering that before she left, she stole a significant amount of money from our family store's register. We tried to give her everything, to show her nothing but love, and this is how she repays us. We never thought our own child could do something like this." I stared at the screen in horror as I scrolled through the comments section, watching my reputation being shredded to pieces by people who'd known me my entire life. Aunts, uncles, family friends, all expressing their shock and disappointment in me. "I can't believe Rachel would do this. She always seemed like such a good girl. After everything you've done for her. This generation has no respect. You should report this to the police. Theft is theft, even if it's family. My mother's response to the police suggestions made me feel physically sick. No, we can't do that to our daughter. Despite everything, we love her too much. We just pray she'll come to her senses and return what she's stolen. Our hearts are broken, but we still have hope she'll make this right. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. The sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty of their lies, it was beyond anything I'd imagined them capable of. They'd thrown me out of my home, and now they were trying to destroy my reputation too. I drove straight to Grandma's house, my heart pounding the entire way. When she opened the door, her face was unreadable, but she stepped aside to let me in. "I don't believe that post for a second," she said before I could speak. "Sit down and tell me what's really going on." The words poured out of me like a broken dam. "I haven't worked at the store for 2 years, Grandma. Not since I was 16. I've been working at Coffee Corner Cafe all this time." My voice cracked. "I'm so sorry I lied to you about it." "Go on," she said quietly, her face growing darker with each word. I told her everything, about working for free from age 14, about my parents refusing to pay me because I owed them for living expenses, about their threats to keep me quiet. When I got to the part about them throwing me out on graduation night, Grandma's hands clenched into fists. "Those lying thieves," she spat, jumping up from her chair. She strode to her office and returned with a stack of papers. "Look at these payroll statements. According to these, you've been receiving a salary at the store from age 14 until now. They've been paying you on paper this whole time, even after you quit. Where do you think that money went?" My head spun as I looked at the numbers. Thousands of dollars, all in my name, all going into some account I'd never seen. Grandma was already on the phone. "James, I need you at the store immediately. Full audit. Every transaction, every account, every penny." She paused, listening. "And find out exactly how much money is missing from the register, the amount they're accusing Rachel of stealing." While Grandma made calls, I opened my laptop. My hands were shaking with anger as I began typing my response to Mom's post. "I've stayed quiet long enough. Here's the truth, I didn't steal anything, and I didn't run away. I was thrown out of my house on graduation night because I refused to pay rent to my own parents, something they've never asked of my brother. I haven't worked at the family store for 2 years, I've been working at Coffee Corner Cafe. My parents kicked me out with nowhere to go, and now they're trying to destroy my reputation to cover their tracks. Want proof? Ask Sarah Mitchell, the owner of Coffee Corner, where I've really been working these past 2 years. Ask about my schedule, my paychecks, my performance. Ask why my parents waited 3 weeks to mention this theft, coincidentally right when Grandma returned from vacation." I shared the post with my friends and coworkers. Within minutes, Sarah had responded. "I can confirm everything Rachel has said. She's been one of our most dedicated employees for the past 2 years, working after school and weekends. Her honesty and work ethic are beyond reproach. I trust her with my business, my customers, and my reputation. These accusations against her are completely false." Within hours of my post, our family's social media erupted into chaos. The same relatives who had condemned me days earlier were now turning on my parents with fury. "How dare you throw your daughter out and then lie about her? You made her work for free since she was 14? You demanded rent from your own child on graduation night? What kind of parents are you?" My mother tried damage control, posting lengthy explanations that only dug her deeper. "You don't understand the whole situation." But people weren't buying it anymore. Every excuse was met with screenshots of my boss's confirmation and more outraged responses. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from my parents. I ignored them all. Instead, I stayed at Grandma's house, watching as her auditor and his team tore through years of the store's financial records. "Rachel," the auditor said one evening, his face grim, "we found something serious." The numbers were staggering. Year after year, my parents had been siphoning money from the store into their personal accounts. They'd created fake vendor payments, inflated expenses, and pocketed the difference. The salary they'd supposedly been paying me? That went straight into an account under their control. But that was just the beginning. The total amount, the auditor hesitated, is over $500,000. Grandma's face turned to stone. She immediately called a family meeting at her house. I sat next to her in the living room as my parents and Tommy arrived, my father trying to look confident, my mother nervously clutching her designer purse. "Sit down," Grandma commanded. "Do you know what we found in the audit?" "Mother, I can explain," my father started. "Explain?" Grandma's voice could have cut glass. "Explain how you stole from me for years? Explain how you pocketed your own daughter's wages? Explain how you tried to frame her for theft to cover your tracks." She slapped the audit report on the coffee table. $500,000. You stole $500,000 from me, while treating your daughter like a slave and throwing her out on the street. My mother burst into tears. "Please, we can work this out." "Oh, we'll work it out all right," Grandma snapped. "You have two choices. Either you pay back every penny you stole, or I press charges and you both go to jail for fraud and embezzlement." The color drained from my father's face. We don't have that kind of money." "Then start selling things. Your cars, your vacation home, everything. And you'll take out loans for the rest." In the end, their expensive cars were sold. Tommy's college fund was emptied. They had to take out massive loans to cover the rest. The beautiful house I'd been thrown out of was now mortgaged to the hilt. After the audit revelations, Grandma called an emergency staff meeting at the store and announced that my parents were no longer associated with this business in any capacity. The look on my mother's face as she was escorted out of the store she'd thought she'd inherit was something I'll never forget. "I've appointed Mark Davidson as temporary manager," Grandma told me over dinner that evening. "He's experienced, trustworthy, and most importantly, he knows this is a temporary position." "Temporary?" I asked. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Until you graduate. This store was always meant for someone who understands both business and ethics." "That's you, Rachel." A week later, she made it official. The family gathered at her lawyer's office as she signed new documents, officially removing my parents from her will. "The store and majority of my assets will go to Rachel," she declared, her voice firm. "She's earned it, not by being born into this family, but by proving her worth through hard work and integrity." But Grandma's heart is too big to completely ignore Tommy. "Your brother will receive a portion of my estate," she told me. "He's not responsible for your parents' actions, and he's still my grandson." Tommy and I have grown closer through all of this, surprisingly. Without our parents' toxic influence constantly pitting us against each other, we found our way to a real sibling relationship. He stops by my dorm room sometimes, and we talk about everything: his struggles to adjust to this new reality, his own college plans now that his fund is gone, his anger at our parents for their betrayal. "I'm sorry," he told me recently. "For all those years I was such an entitled brat while they treated you so badly. I didn't see it then, but I see it now." As for our parents, I haven't spoken to them since that day at Grandma's house. They still try to reach out occasionally: birthday cards, holiday messages, attempts at reconciliation. I send them all back unopened. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Grandma comes to visit me at college regularly, usually bringing coffee from Corner Cafe. She's become a regular there since learning my story. We sit in the campus courtyard, discussing my classes and planning the future of the store. She's teaching me everything she knows about the business, just like she did when I was little, but now with real stakes and real purpose. "You know what the most valuable thing in business is?" she asked me recently. "Integrity. Without it, no amount of success means anything. Your parents never understood that. But you do." Looking back at everything that's happened, I realize that while my parents' cruel treatment hurt me deeply, It also taught me invaluable lessons about who I want to be, and who I don't. Their actions showed me exactly what kind of business person I won't become. Next year, I'll graduate with my business degree. The store that was meant to be my brother's by birthright will become mine by merit. But more importantly, I'll have earned something no one can take away, the knowledge that I succeeded not because of my family's advantages, but despite their obstacles. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its greatest challenges. My parents thought they were punishing me by making me work in that store at 14. Instead, they were giving me the experience I'd need to one day run it. They thought throwing me out would break me. Instead, it set me free. And that expensive tableware store that started all of this? Just wait until you see what I do with it.